The rain came down like a torrent of needles, ripping through the gray morning as if the sky itself had cracked open. On the lonely highway outside Brookside County, a battered pickup truck crawled through the storm, its wipers struggling to keep up. Inside it sat Rowan Hale, a single father fighting the storm outside and the tougher storm inside, one made of overdue bills, looming court dates, and the fear of losing the only thing that mattered, his 9-year-old daughter, Mira. Today was supposed to be calm, a delivery run to make just enough money to keep the lights on, but fate had never been gentle with Rowan. And he had no idea that within the storm-blurred distance, standing beside a stalled car, was the very woman who could decide the future of his life. If you believe in kindness, redemption, and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to RW Insights. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. The figure on the roadside stood hunched against the wind, clutching a broken umbrella that flipped helplessly in every gust. Rowan almost drove past. He was late, the storm was dangerous, and he had enough chaos of his own. But something in him refused to ignore someone stranded alone in weather like this. He pulled over, the tires sliding slightly on the soaked asphalt, and stepped out into the roaring wind. The woman looked up, her face pale but composed, her soaked coat clinging to her. She introduced herself faintly as Marianne Voss, her voice trembling less from fear and more from the cold shock of the storm. Rowan didn't ask many questions. He simply guided her toward his truck, shielding her from the rain as best he could. Inside the warm cab, she exhaled shakily, thanking him over and over, but Rowan only nodded with a tired smile. He drove her toward town, navigating the flooded streets. The storm seemed endless, its ferocity shaking the windows, but inside the truck, a quiet humanity softened the chaos. Marianne noticed the child's drawing taped on the dashboard, a crayon portrait of Rowan holding hands with a little girl. Mira. Rowan's entire world. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight, the kind of heaviness that comes from long days and silent battles. Marianne felt a strange pull of empathy. Something in his eyes showed a man who wasn't broken but was carrying too much alone. When they reached the edge of town, Rowan learned that Marianne was headed toward the courthouse. The storm had knocked down trees and power lines, blocking many roads, but Rowan insisted on getting her as close as he safely could. She thanked him again with a warm, lingering look, one that carried unspoken curiosity, gratitude, and perhaps something deeper, but Rowan simply nodded and drove away, needing to finish work before the afternoon hearing that might change everything. Hours later, after dropping off his deliveries, he rushed to the courthouse with his clothes still damp, carrying documents he hoped would convince the judge to grant him custody rights despite his mounting hardships. Myra's mother, long absent and unpredictable, was suddenly fighting for visitation she had ignored for years. Rowan feared losing his daughter more than anything. As he entered the quiet courtroom, breath heavy and heart pounding, he froze. Sitting high on the bench, robes still slightly creased from the storm, was Judge Marianne Voss. Her eyes widened as she recognized him. Rowan felt his stomach drop. The world seemed cruel at that moment. Of all the judges, fate had placed him before the woman he had helped only hours ago. He braced himself for the worst, fearing she might think he wanted something or had manipulated fate somehow. But Marianne's gaze softened, remembering not just the man who had stopped in a dangerous storm but the father who drove with a child's drawing taped like a shield of love. As the case unfolded, Rowan spoke honestly about his struggles, how he worked multiple jobs, how he tried to give Mira the stability he lacked growing up, how he feared she'd be caught in the crossfire of someone else's inconsistent affection. His voice cracked once, but he did not try to hide it. He had nothing left but truth. Marianne listened in silence, her expression unreadable yet deeply attentive, as though each word pulled gently at the edges of her heart. After a tense review of the statements and details, Judge Voss stepped away to consider her ruling. The courtroom felt suffocating with suspense. Rowan stared at the floor, hands shaking slightly, preparing himself for the worst. When Marianne finally returned, the storm outside had quieted, and a strange calm settled over the room. She spoke with firmness but compassion, granting Rowan full custodial rights while allowing safe, structured visitation for the mother. Rowan's breath caught in his chest. Relief surged through him so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. Judge Voss concluded the hearing, her voice steady yet carrying an unspoken warmth. She didn't mention the storm, the rescue, or the unexpected twist of fate that had brought them together. But as Rowan left the courthouse, he paused and met her eyes. She offered a faint, knowing nod, the kind people share when life reminds them that kindness can ripple back in ways no one expects. In the days that followed, Rowan found himself replaying the storm over and over, realizing how easily he could have driven past, how easily everything could have gone another way. Marianne, too, carried the memory, moved by the compassion of a stranger who had no idea that the future he protected with kindness would come back to protect him in return. Their paths crossed again weeks later during a community fundraiser. This time, Marianne approached first, her smile warm and real, no longer hidden behind the distance of a courtroom bench. They talked long after the event ended, about storms, children, courage, and the unexpected moments that stitch broken worlds back together. The ordinary morning turned extraordinary had changed them both. Rowan had regained hope. Marianne had rediscovered the weight of compassion. And somewhere between their shared experiences, a new beginning quietly took root. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to RW Insights. Your engagement helps keep these powerful stories alive. Special request: comment below what part of the story moved you the most.